everyone. Today I am joined by Jesse Howe. He's over in Maryland. But I think what's really exciting is this topic he brings on up, and that is, should we be convincing parents to do online tutoring? And it's a great question. And so what you're going to get to experience today is how I actually coach different people through figuring out some of these answers, because it's not that there's one answer to this, right? There's so many different perspectives on this, and there's so many things that go on into the question that this makes it for a really great call for you to guys see what does coaching even look like, all of that great stuff. So really, we're answering this question for Jesse, but at the same time, you guys can feel free to add in your questions, your thoughts, your perspectives as well. So please do that inside of our chat. I see that we've got Robert and Beth inside of the house. Awesome. And definitely introduce who you are, where you guys are from, and what you tutor as well. So as I said, Jesse has been teaching elementary students in reading and writing, and that is his wheelhouse and my wheelhouse are like the same world. I love it. And you know what I love is that there's no like competition, because there's so many kids right now, especially with COVID, that are behind, that we all get to like be in this together versus feeling like, oh, it's competition or anything like that. So Jesse, tell us more about, like, when you ask the question, should we be convincing parents to do online tutoring? What are your thoughts around that question? What's been happening for you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Joanne. I appreciate it. Definitely a devout follower, and I love everything that you do. So I think it's really great. So kind of what this came about was that I look at when I talk to parents, and I generally will do phone calls actually rather than video conferencing, because I feel it's just kind of more, it's a little more easy for the parents kind of to dive into that, especially for an initial kind of screening. I had an excellent success rate, and I look at them as sales calls. I'm selling myself. I'm selling my product, which is me. So I look at it as completely as a sales call. So I'm just talking about my background, my experience, and what I can offer their family, what I can offer, their child. And I had, from the last year or so, I had an excellent success rate. And then I had a couple in a row where it was just completely bent on the in-person tutoring kind of world rather than the online, which is what I offer 98% of the time.
Sure.
And so that's why I kind of brought up this driving question to the Facebook online supporters group community, just to kind of see where people were at with it, what they thought about, maybe, the ethics of trying to convince those that are bent on in-person into online, and kind of what it means for us as online tutors as well, or in-person tutors.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are the different marketing strategies that you use where people are finding you?
So for me, it's all through a lot of word of mouth and Facebook groups as well. Through my social media platforms, mostly Facebook is what I'm kind of concentrating that on. Wisant as well is where I pick up a fair amount of clients. And I've actually got a great tip from another member of the group. I got to give a shout out to Kristen Faison, who I had an awesome chat with last week. She's in Vermont. She does chemistry and physics, and she turned me on to something called BNI, which is kind of like a small business network. And I've got actually a lunch set up later this week with a local BNI group to kind of see what doors that can open for me as well.
Sure. And that's a whole nother world. That is for sure. I've been a part of BNI luncheons and that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But I love that you're going off of obviously the word of mouth. How long have you been in business?
So coming up on 2 years now. So I launched just before COVID hit. Great timing on my part, I would say.
Yeah.
And so coming up on 2 years now.
Awesome. And then you've got some Facebook groups that you're a part of, Wisant that you're a part of as well. And so it might, one thing that will make this transition a little bit easier is also thinking of some other marketing strategies that will attract the people who are looking for online. Because if we constantly are putting ourselves in a position where people are like, oh, I really want, in-person tutoring, I try to stay away from those marketing strategies. Now, I have
Mhm.
found that my Google My Business, that has been a huge place where I've been able to get a large amount of my students lately, and I've been getting more of the "Are you doing in-person tutoring?" And so, when I have the conversation with them, my website, if they ever click on my website, does say I'm the online reading tutor. So again, that's like attraction marketing, right? So I'm really out there with letting people know, hey, I'm doing online tutoring, but we always want to speak from the perspective of the parent and not our own perspective. So I think as long as you keep the perspective with the parents and the child's needs at heart, you're going to get a really great conversion rate. So, because you do the reading, there is that opportunity where you can lead with generosity and offer a free assessment and just say, hey, let's just try online, like let's just do the assessment online and just see how does your child do with that. Does she respond well to that? If not, maybe in person would be a better fit, and then you can make that decision of, do I want to do in person or not? I have made some, here and there, I'll make some exceptions and allow a kid to come to my house. I do let people know though ahead of time, like they know very clearly where I kind of stand on it, like that I do prefer online versus in person. And so I just say things like, what I have found is that online is just as effective as in person. So it's not the online or offline piece that makes it work well or not work well. A lot of people saw virtual learning and they saw that virtual learning didn't work well for their student. But virtual learning is not the same thing as tutoring. So tutoring in person and tutoring on the computer, it just happens to be that the computer is a medium. It's a tool. It is not the tutor. So just like in the classroom, the teacher actually didn't change their style of teaching. And that's what you noticed happening, is that kids were turning off their videos. They weren't participating, but they're already doing those things inside of the classroom. You just got to get a sneak peek of that. So
Yes.
in the classroom, what they're doing is they're playing on their phones, they're doing other things, they're hiding it from the teachers, as well as they possibly can, and then getting yelled at for it. But what you got to see was a piece of that and what that looks like in the classroom. With online tutoring, because it's one-on-one, the type of tutoring that you and I do, right? Because it's reading instruction, is, whether the child is sitting here next to me and we're reading a book together, or whether the child is online with me and we're reading a book together, we are still interacting one-on-one together. It doesn't make a difference whether it's online or not. So it's a very different style of teaching. And so that's what makes tutoring efficient to begin with and makes it good or not good, right? So you're going to have tutors that are good tutors. You're going to have tutors that aren't great tutors, that are able to do it well, some that aren't able to do it well. I've been doing this since, and you can say before the pandemic, I've been doing it since 2010. My students absolutely love being able to do it online. They love that they have the ability to make mistakes without feeling judged. They love that, I'm not taller than them online. We're the same size. Like Jesse,
So
like you and I right now, we're the same height,
yeah.
right?
Can we dive into that for a second? What do you mean by
Yeah.
that? By make mistakes by being judged? Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
But yeah, so a lot of times like kids they'll constantly be looking at you when they are looking for like your feedback of your expressions, and like, are you doing it right? Are you not doing it right? And sometimes just your size in general can be something that can make a child feel intimidated,
Yes.
versus really comfortable with you. The kids are already like, they'll come to the session sometimes with their stuffed animals and their pajamas, right? And so when they come with their stuffed animals and their pajamas, we just make fun with it, right? We just have
Of
a good
course.
time with it. And
Absolutely.
nobody comes to a tutoring session to my house with their stuffed animal. It's like a different intimacy level
Yes.
that you get to have without it being weird or judgmental. And I think that the kids just feel like they're just accepted for who they are. I also find that the kids are able to really self-monitor their own energy levels, which is actually really cool to watch. And anybody else who like watches my students online, they might be like, oh my gosh, that kid has like ADHD and they're just like all over the place. It's like, But that's not what I'm focusing on. Like, I'm not focusing on do they have a toy in their hand unless it's distracting them. I'm not focusing on if they are twisting in their seat unless it's distracting them. I'm not focusing on if they need to get up and kind of like walk around their chair as they do the activity while I'm doing that, because it's not about classroom management anymore. And I love that. It is about what does the child need? I had one little girl, she brushed her hair the entire time, but she did her work the entire time.
Right.
And it was like the best session we had. I'm like, hey, anytime you need to brush your hair during our session, you totally go for it. Do it. Like, I'm like, you were really focused the entire time. Did you notice that? And she was like, yeah. So like they know how to self-monitor themselves, I feel like, in a way that sometimes isn't acceptable. If they were in person, that's not something that they would do, is it?
Right.
And so I think that there's just this naturalness. It just feels more genuine to the child and to the tutor as well. Because like, okay, like you like just kind of sitting here and tapping your hand over and over again doesn't faze me at all.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with parents as well who once again, who tend to think that the in-person is just such a superior product, right? Let's call it a product. And, often my counter would be, I've had students in person who are completely distracted, who are tough to get back on task, and I've had that online as well.
Yeah.
So just because you bring somebody into the room is not going to immediately solve that problem of that ADHD. It depends. It's up to the tutor and a teacher in the classroom to be able to kind of guide that student into an appropriate space, and also using brain breaks and breaks in general to break up, that hour-long session or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. And that is the beauty of it. Like, we can do like a 30-minute session versus an hour session too. I would never do a 30-minute session for somebody coming to my house because it's so disruptive. There's too much transition time. That's actually one of the things that I tell people. Like, I actually find that with online, there's less transition time, so you get more bang for your buck. So instead of me having to greet you at the door, then you greet my dog, because I have a dog. And then you pet my dog, and then we say our hellos, and then we come downstairs. That could be 3 to 5 minutes of missed learning time.
And the same thing on the back end as well, because you do it on the end of the hour as well.
Exactly.
Especially if you're lining up multiple students one after another, as you and I both do.
Yes, exactly. And I do tell them that too. Like, I don't have time to chat right after the session, just so you know. I'm not trying to be rude, but I do have another student who will be online right afterwards, so I have to get right with them. And so a lot of times I just actually will send, if I do have somebody come to my house, I just send them on upstairs right at that time, and then I like click right on with my next student. I haven't done that in a while just because of the pandemic, but I definitely love this. So we have somebody who said in here, it sounds like you have a great success rate, Jesse. Joanne will probably mention this, but if it might also help you to take a look at your sales conversation strategy. So Joanne's taught me about this. I was doing it backwards before. She's taught me how to ask a lot of questions about them rather than trying to sell myself or experience or qualifications. And that helps to understand their needs that are both qualified in the love of working with children. Empathy is the name of the game. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. So, at the end of the day, it is all just about asking questions of them. Like, even if you're like on that sales conversation, right? It's all about, so tell me more about like what your child is struggling with. So what does your sales conversation look like when you have that?
So first off, much like you, I'm a parent. I have a 4-year-old, and I think you have a teenage daughter or daughters.
3 teenage
okay,
daughters.
There you go. Get your hands full with that. So, as you know, people love to talk about their children, myself included. I'm sure you do. So my thing, honestly, is opening up the conversation, introducing myself, and then just being a good listener.
Yep.
Asking probing questions when I need to, asking about what the teacher feedback looks like or sounds like, asking about, what the child's motivation is. Are they accepting to having a tutor? Because not all are, as you know, and that can really influence what a session looks like and how I approach it as their tutor. So kind of after just being a really good listener and taking my time to ask them probing questions, it's just explaining my background and explaining my approach, telling them that I've got over a decade experience in the classroom as an elementary educator, also as a reading specialist, that I worked overseas in international schools for many years. So if they wanted to add a Spanish component, I'm also an all ages Spanish tutor as well. So, and just kind of breaking down what it's going to look like, that initial session where we focus a lot on relationship building,
Mm-hmm.
That's something like I really talk about a lot with my parents. I say, that first session, maybe even more, is going to be all about getting to know the student, letting them ask me questions as well. I try to be an open book, why I'm doing this. And also, what are their likes and dislikes? Do they like Pokemon? Do they like ice hockey? That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I can talk about anything. So we're going to rap about whatever it is that they bring to the table and take the time to build that relationship. Because without that, you're really not going to be able to hit the ground running academically.
Yeah.
I have found in my experience. I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that different people can go about it different ways. And for me, it's in how I respond to the child is how I start building that relationship, asking questions of them before each session. How are you doing? And as I'm asking, how are you doing? Or how was school today? Or, hey, we didn't see each other last week because I was on vacation. I was in Florida. Did you miss me? Like little things like that are just like fun little openers that you can have to really build that relationship too. So yeah, it's definitely an ongoing thing, and I think it sounds like you've got a great way of being able to chat with parents and be able to get them to move forward. And I think like at the end, oh, my phone is taking over my phone's trying to take on over my headset, so I have to turn off my my Bluetooth, guys, because Bluetooth is like
conflicting technology. Everything's coming in, right?
Everything wants to connect with everything, and it's like then it takes over. Like,
yeah,
it's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Which can be absolutely wonderful, and also sometimes not.
I know. Like, and it's so funny because usually people just laugh. I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry." Like, because your phone just starts talking to you, and you're like,
"Yeah,
no, stop talking to me." But I think that you've got some really great strategies. You've got a great mindset towards it, and I think when people just need to understand like what is that difference. I think between the virtual, because now before, we had the issue that people never even tried it and they weren't even open-minded to it. It was like, no, that can't work. Like they had already made a decision. And so it was
well, that's why
you're
the OG.
it, right?
Yeah. I mean, you've been doing this for so long that you were, so pre-pandemic that you saw, I think your perspective is very much more interesting than most because you've seen the curve.
Yeah.
You've seen how people have kind of come around on it, and it's become so much more mainstream now.
Yeah. Which is very, very, very interesting just to see as also, as somebody who's been in the industry for a while that, I was probably one of the only people in the world that was excited when the pandemic came. Cause I'm like, oh my God, everybody's going to move online. This is so cool. They're going to get to see how amazing this is. And that is exactly what happened. Like as soon as the pandemic hit, I no longer had to have that conversation anymore with people. And I was so excited. But now that we're on the backside of the pandemic and it's become more of an endemic, I think that we're experiencing it from a different point of view. People are like, we really want to get back into like working with people again and getting our kids involved and all of those kinds of things. But I don't think what they don't understand is that also means that you're also going to be driving to all of your kids' softball games, dance lessons, all of this. You're going to go back to this very hectic lifestyle. That,
an Uber driver.
Right? It is seriously going to burn you out. And so as a parent, I know that you also want to bring tutoring to the in-person sector because you think your child's going to learn better that way. But a teacher is a teacher no matter what. A good teacher is a good teacher no matter what. A bad teacher will be a bad teacher no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's in person and it doesn't matter if it's online. So what you experience with virtual teaching and tutoring are two completely different things. Could you run into a bad online tutor? Yes. Am I one of those? No. Of course, I'm not going to say
exactly.
I've been doing this since 2010. No, I'm great at what I do, and I'm able to get results, and so then I'll just let the people know, like, okay, so let's start off with a free assessment. Would you be open to that? And that's it. They say yes, great. Let's just try it online. You'll get a feel for what that would look like. So I don't even describe like what my teaching looks like or how it's going to go. I'll just say I'll just do a free assessment, and we'll just see if this can work. And then I do the assessment for the child. During that assessment, I do ask some of those beginning questions, like, so what types of books do you like to read? And, how do you feel about reading? And, if you were able to get better at reading, what would be one thing you'd want to get better at? I asked that the kids those kinds of questions. And so how do you feel about this? I asked them that too. How do you feel about doing the tutoring this way versus having to like come to my house and sit in the car for a little while and then go home? And they always say, I love it. I'd much prefer this. And so then I'd bring that into the conversation with the parent as well. And I say, hey, well, we had a really great session. I was able to figure out exactly where your child's at, what they're struggling with, and also get their perspective on how they feel about the online tutoring piece of it too. So, so then I just start telling them about the reading and then asking them questions. So some of the stuff that you do on that initial sales call / conversation, I actually do after the assessment, and I'll ask those questions like, so what is the teacher noticing?
Yeah.
What have you been noticing at home? If I were able to wave a magic wand over your child and fix one aspect of reading, what would that be?
Right.
And then I say, so I did ask, Charlotte how she liked online doing it this way. And she said she actually really liked it. Not sure what your perspective is, but, at this point, are you willing, are you ready to move forward?
Yes.
Are you ready to get started? And they always say yes. Yep.
Right.
I'm ready to get started. Or, I just need to chat with my husband, I'll be like, great. So here's the next step. I'm going to write up the assessment. I'm going to send that off to you tomorrow. And then I'm also going to send you how payment works, all of that jazz, and hopefully answer any questions that you have. If there's still questions that you have after you read that, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Sound good? They say yes. I say great. And then we're off the phone or we're off Zoom.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. And it just kind of comes down to them just realizing that you care. And I think that's where just us being a little generous with our time and saying, okay, here's a free assessment. Let me find out what your kid's really struggling with. Every parent wants to know, where is my child currently at? Right.
What are you typically using for your pre-assessment like that? Are you using just a running record with kind of comprehension questions on the back end?
No, I actually use a QRI, so the qualitative reading inventory. So I'm finding out exactly what grade level they're reading at. I take a look at how are they doing with reading sight words with that assessment. I take a look at them reading the passages and then also the comprehension questions. So I'm taking a look at all three of those components. And then for the kids that can't read those passages, I'm making sure to do more of like a little dyslexia screener kind of ahead of time and saying, okay, where are they at with letter names, sounds, if necessary? So that's a diagnostic assessment I throw in for those kids that can't read a passage yet, and determining their age, right? But the beginning readers, like, okay, so what are the names? What are the sounds? Can you rhyme? Can you segment phonemes? Can you blend phonemes? Where are you at with all of those kinds of skills, those pre-reading skills that are necessary, but also the things that sometimes kids with dyslexia, they struggle with the most when it comes to reading. So really finding out all of that information ahead of time and then approaching the parent. It's really interesting too, because I was actually doing I was having a child read a passage the other day, and they're reading a passage and they got every single question right, but man, did they have a high rate of errors, right? I was like, okay, I'll be honest with you, like, this is a red flag for me when I see that kids are able to make as many mistakes as your child does, but then have this high comprehension level. You usually only see that with like dyslexic students.
Right.
And she's like, oh, yeah, he's definitely dyslexic. I'm like, okay, well, great. I'm glad we got that one out of the way.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't diagnose it, but if you already had it diagnosed, perfect. Like, she was not information that she gave me ahead of time. But I do that, again, that kind of lets them know your expertise in a way that you're able to already see it. And they're like, oh, she already saw that. That's the issue for my child. Okay, cool. It gives them just that extra feeling like, oh, okay, you know how to work with kids like mine. You like working with kids like mine. This is going to be a good fit. And that's really what they're looking for. They're looking for, do you like working with kids like mine? And can you get results with them? Those are really the two big things. And if you can leave the conversation with them feeling like you're a big yes on both of those accounts, they're going to want to move forward with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless if it's online or not. I mean, you can still convince parents to do online. I don't work very hard at it. The biggest thing that I just do personally is I just say, let's just try. If I can get them to just try the assessment online,
It's done.
From there, it's
Absolutely.
done. From there, it's done. From there, they get to realize, oh, okay, yeah, she's right. Like, there really isn't that big deal. And I tell them, like, right out of the gate, like, my goal isn't to convince you whether
Yes.
online or in person is better. However, I am going to just see if this would be a good fit for you and your family. Are you
That's a
open
good
to
approach.
that? If they're open to it, we've got someplace we can go, right? If they're completely not open to it, all right, that's not going to be a good fit then. Right now
And
I'm
some
only
aren't.
doing online. Some aren't a good fit. And some I don't fight for.
Yeah.
As I've gotten, because I'm booked solid right now. So, I mean, I may have one spot open, but that's also a spot where I could do some rescheduling too. So it's like you don't want to schedule yourself so tight that you can't do any reschedules for your current clients. So,
When you say you're booked solid, Joanne, what does that mean for you for contact time generally in a given week?
I'm trying to go down to 10 hours, but I'm way beyond that.
Right.
I used to have more students that I worked with. It was about 30, 35 hours I was working a week. I found out that was just a bit too much for me.
You're juggling a lot of other things as well with the coaching and so.
So I've got two aspects of my business, right? And so, and Book Solid will be different for every person depending on what it is that you want. So Book Solid just means that all the hours you want to sell, you've sold. I'm actually over Book Solid because I've sold more hours than I want to sell.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I hate when you get the perfect client who just like comes to you and they just want to start working with you right away.
Right.
So it's you're like, oh, I love working with kids like this one. Oh. And it's so frustrating because you're like, I want to take them on, but I can't. Or you're like, I want to take them on, but I shouldn't. That's a beautiful place to be. And absolutely everybody can get to that place and all of that. So it was awesome being able to chat with you, Jesse. I hope you've got a little bit more perspective on about the whole like online tutoring. Should we convince them? Shouldn't we convince them? How do we go about it? What are things we can do? Do you feel like you left being able to have more perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you taking the time as well. And it definitely gave me a few tips and a few strategies to kind of how to approach those situations a little bit differently. I like the piece that you talked about, just saying, I'm not here to convince you. Like these are two different products. One of them I think I do really well. And if we give it a shot as, in the form of a free assessment, then perhaps you'll want to move forward with it and perhaps you won't. Right. And either option is fine.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to go about it because it's you're not like there to try to convince them that this is the only way. Yes, some kids are going to respond possibly to in person better than online. I haven't experienced that personally, but but perhaps that could be a possibility for some students. So if it is, I haven't run into them, but it definitely you're slowly opening their mind versus kind of making them feel forced into it.
Yes.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you
so
guys
much,
for joining us as well. We're glad that you guys are here, and hopefully you guys were able to get some perspective as well on what it means for you. But just know that there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to how you should approach this. Just always approach it with empathy and understanding from the client's perspective, and it'll be a win-win for everyone. So thanks for joining us, Jesse and Jake. Thank you guys for